Years ago, I began to understand this truth. It takes all kind to make this world go around. Each of us are in different stages and phases of consciousness, but we are all a part of a collective body having the experiences that make us feel complete, whole, and make this living experience worthwhile. Some of us, we live this life like it's the last. We subscribe to the logic that you got one life to live, so you may as well do it big. Others, we know this not all it is. This is temporary. We just passing through. And with that knowledge, we tend to move differently. We tend to make our decisions based more from a spiritual place than physical place, meaning how this will affect me economically. We live in a system where we have people who y'all say live off the system. First of all, there's a difference between living and thriving. I'm just saying. And of course, the government wants to get rid of those people because those are your table shakers. Those are the ones who gonna say what they feel. Those are the ones who's gonna speak their piece. They're gonna say the stuff that you're thinking of, but you can't say because you're trying to feed your children and pour into your 401k. Ultimately, the government wants us all so busy that we don't have time to really fight back. We don't have time to complain about the candidates that are available to represent us, which means that they get SSI, they get welfare, they get food stamps, government services. A lot of us, just because we get those services, it doesn't mean that we are naive about the plight of our ancestors. It doesn't mean that we're not socially conscious or we're not informed. For some of us, the trauma that we deal with, it's actually a grace that we're not in a work environment, because the disruption we could cause if we were to have a bad day could potentially be catastrophic for everyone in the workplace. I'm not going to say that many of us don't get our benefits and mentally check out and can be found somewhere self-medicating at any given moment. But that too speaks to a government that has let the people down. So don't put all of us in that category, and don't judge us all with the same measuring stick in which you choose to judge everyone who is receiving benefits from the government. Because my ancestors were prisoners of war, and if you ask me, it's reparations, and they ain't gave me enough. Trauma affects us differently. Trauma impacts some people more severely. Some of us, we get right out and work, and we don't take the time to do that self-care. And whatever toll it takes on the body, you deal with it during retirement when you're off living the best quality of life you possibly can after you've worked yourself 30, 40 years without really just taking the time to take care of yourself. So whatever quality of life that is, thankfully you will have the resources, hopefully, to be able to find some joy, to find some peace, to find some comfort. And I'm all for whatever road we choose to charter in this existence, whatever path we choose to make our own. But when you start trying to belittle others and condemn others because they would rather accept the crumbs that fall off the table, because many of the people who accept those crumbs are people who are in positions not just to call out or confront their peers, their co-workers or community members, but they're in a position to challenge the very institutions and the systems that are responsible for our oppression. These systems and institutions that many times people who are in a higher tax bracket cannot afford to confront or challenge, because it may impede upon them growing with their company or receiving a higher position, a raise, being promoted. Those little benefits where they sit at home and they sit in the house and they're not out bothering people or harming people, or a lot of times helping to perpetuate an even more toxic environment because there's a bunch of unhealed people working together for the sake of a big check, big 401k, a big income. And unfortunately, because oftentimes those are the people who are so busy securing their financial freedom and liberation, there's not much time to be a part of the process of developing the kind of leadership that speaks to us as a society from top to bottom. But oddly enough, your voice would matter more than mine. People going to work to get big checks and feeding this capitalistic machine, all of these unhealed people who are chasing the bag, they've made it possible that the best options we've had to choose from for our leadership were the like of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And so if I choose to take the crumbs so that I don't have to keep my head down and be quiet and settle for what's given to me, don't come for me or try to attack me because I'm not moving like you move. Because at the end of the day, whether you know it or not, I'm still fighting for you. I'm not just fighting for other people who have less, other people who live below the poverty line. I'm fighting for a generation of beings who will be able to go after the big check and won't have to keep their head down and be quiet, and will be able to speak out when they're being discriminated against because they're black. They're being discriminated against because they're trans. They're being discriminated against because they're queer, because they're HIV positive, because they're an ex-con, because they had a drug history, for whatever reason, whatever stigma they're facing. I am speaking for those people no matter what tax bracket you're in and no matter where you fall on the economic and social spectrum. Keep your head down. Get your check. Get your bag. But don't ever get so big in your mind that you think that us little guys on the bottom who are accepting those crumbs that fall off the table, and there are countries around the world where the government is providing so much more to its people. Universal health care, allowances. There were countries where during the pandemic, their rent were paid. They took care of their people. There are countries where if you have a drug addiction, they give you the drugs so that you don't have to steal. There are countries that operate far better than America, but y'all try to act like America is the best thing since sliced bread. And so not all of us who are out here just accepting the crumbs that fall off the table are accepting them just so we could lay up and mooch off the government. Some of us are accepting the bare minimum so that we don't have to keep our head down and be quiet, and we can keep speaking out and keep speaking out until we see the change that this country actually needs. Not just for those of us who are living below the poverty line, those of us who are making minimum wage, but for those of us who are clocking those dollars and getting those bags and have to keep their head down in order to feed their children and pay their mortgage. This is about your children having more freedom and not less freedom. But maybe you don't care about that. You had to work hard. You had to work 10 times as hard. So maybe they should have to as well. One of the first things we learned is we are what we eat. And we didn't grow up eating out of a microwave and everything being genetically modified. So having that type of expectation for this generation of children is nowhere near realistic, which is another reason why they're getting those robots ready. They know it too. Thank you for listening to me. I hope that didn't fly over y'all's head. Have a great day. Lay Live, Lay Learn Nation. Purple ones, rise.